Because we're going to just start a little business. We'll just make a little hamburger business here. You'll have to pardon my drawing because it's not too good. I got this little place in here, I sell hamburgers. Now, I got to borrow some money to buy the first hamburger at least, don't I? I might have went down and cut down a couple of trees and made this house, but I probably have to go get somebody to one way or another sell me his beef. So we'll say that I borrow just $1 to buy the first raw hamburger. And so I get it in here and I cook it and I add some bread to it and I get the bread too in this $1. So now if I got to have a profit, we'll just say I want to sell my hamburger here for $2. That gives me now enough to pay my expenses, my interest, and my raw materials and some profit, right? Okay, now we'll just say, for example, that we come in here and now my interest cost on this goes up, we'll just say 25 cents. Well, now just because my interest alone went up 25%, my cost went up 25 cents, didn't it? So if I'm going to maintain the exact same profit I had before, I'm going to have to add 25 cents to my hamburger, aren't I? Well, now we'll say that through all this, everybody taxes a little more to pay their interest on their loans, the school boards and the cities and the towns and the federal government, the state government, and everybody else, and that amounts to 25 cents. Just the taxes I have to pay just on the interest. Not what they do, just on the interest. And if it'd be more on the other, but now just to pay that, we got to add another 25 cents. So now all of a sudden I'm going to have a $2.50 hamburger before, or I've got to start losing profit, don't I? And this is actually where inflation comes from. It doesn't come from increasing the money, because we clearly see if the economy grows and the people multiply and the cattle multiply, and most everything I know out there has a tendency to come from seed, the seeds grows and spouts and tries to get more seed, and it just everything keeps going, doesn't it? Natural reproduction just constantly keeps things growing and getting bigger. But the money supply only gets bigger when we borrow more money. But yet it has to get bigger or we couldn't do all the rest of this production cost that we have. Because as the population grows, if either you people's got to go with less money, everybody's got to have now $9 and $8 and $7 instead of 10, or then the money supply has to grow. So see, it's not the growth in the money supply that causes inflation, truly. It's the cost of the expenses that come from the interest on that money. There's where you really get your price inflation come from. And if you really study it, and it was really obvious this back on the farm in the 80s especially, all the old farmers said they got almost the same for their grain and all that kind of stuff they raised that they did in the 40s, but everything else went way up. You sound like you know that, or shaking your head like you do. Okay, well now wait a minute. If it was true inflation, wouldn't, in fact, if you look in the dictionary, it says inflation is a general rise in prices. Well, this is kind of like saying the water comes up, so all the boats float up, half of them float up and half of them go down. Well, come on, we know that can't make sense. So we can't have true inflation because not all the prices, the wages and the raw materials don't go up at the same as their finished prices do. And we all see and experience it. And that's why you don't have true inflation. You have inflation caused by that, but it's not a general inflation because the wages and the raw materials never keep up with the finished prices. And you can see why, because the finished price, if he's going to stay in business and he gets to set his charges, and I don't recall of ever getting to go to the sale barn and sell my cattle and tell them exactly how much I wanted for them. No, they all bid and I got what they give me. So see, this is the only one here that gets to set his prices. When you go downtown, you always have to pay pretty much what they ask. Used to be you could go into these merchants and you could say, well, how about let's cut a deal? I'll give you so much. Now the clerk said, I don't have any authority to do that. I mean, I got to charge you this or I don't know what to do. I scan it and I go through and you pay or else. Put it back. And the only way more money would cause inflation if we all bought things at auction. Because then we'd actually bid up, wouldn't we? How many people in the last month have bought anything at auction? One guy. But mostly you go to the store. How many ever went to a store in the last 10 years and bought anything at auction at the store? You did, actually went there and it was...
I negotiate all the time.
And you actually get the bid on the product.
Yep, I said I
Well, wait a minute. That isn't the same as bidding. Are you standing there bidding against somebody with that?
No, I mean, I tell the customer, business, I don't want to pay that.
Well, yeah, and occasionally you get by with that.
Yeah.
You don't go in many supermarkets, though.
No.
Okay, my point proven. Okay, but see what I'm saying about, but actually, if you actually drove up the prices by just because you had too much money, then we'd have to be standing there bidding each other. You'd say, well, I'll give you this much, because you're trying to get the price to come down, aren't you? You're not trying to bid the price up, are you? And that's the difference. If we actually had inflation, too much money driving the price up, we'd have to be there and bidding up more. Or you want $1 for that? Well, I'm glad to give you $1.25. And this guy said, well, I'd rather have, I'll give you $1.50. That's the only way that increasing the money would drive up inflation. So see, even that, they don't teach it right. And this is how all this affects your life. And you can't escape it. And the only way to escape this is change the monetary system. And we won't get into that today. We'll get into that the other. And with that, I'll close. And if you have any questions whatsoever, I'll be glad to answer them as long as I can. And if you don't, I have some books back there that I've written you might be interested in taking a look at. And I wouldn't be opposed if you bought one. You got a question?
You said that the local bank can generate the money 12 for 1.
Yeah.
Now, who gives them permission to do that? The Fed?
It all depends on the bank. If it's a state bank,
State bank?
yeah. Actually, the truth is nobody gives them any permission to do that. They just do it from because nobody's ever stopped them and nobody ever said they couldn't. But you can, one of the legislators told me, his banker friends had done a lot of research on that, and there is no place in any statute of any kind that gives them the power to create new credit or new money.
So where does the 12, what does the 1 represent? If they could lend out, it used to be 6,
Yeah.
now it's 12 for 1. What is the 1?
Well, it used to represent one of the bills I had up here. And I recently had a young economist in town I met, and we had some discussions before he found out I was too passionate about what I did and he didn't want to talk to me anymore. But he said we actually don't even use a reserve anymore, if the truth is actually known. But really what they have to have is supposedly is a reserve, according to the banking system. They have to have so much money in numbers in another banking account, in the Federal Reserve or in a Federal Reserve bank. And if they have that, then they can loan out 12 times that much. And if you go to most banks, they will tell you they only loan out to depositors' money. You deposit and they loan it to somebody else. But with a few questions to them, you soon find out that's not true. Because if you ask them, okay, whose money did you get? I mean, whose money did you loan to me? I don't know. Well, we put it all in the pool. Well, when you took it out of the pool, how did you know who was short? And then we even have a problem there, because even at that, even if they did that, now you think about that. If you put $100 in your account and they loan it to me, and I pay them $110, well, where did that $10 come from? I couldn't have got it from your deposit because you only put in $100. But I got to pay back $110. I got to pay back your principal plus the interest if that was really true, and it's not. Well, we'd still have the problem where that money, the interest, come from. Because that has to be created somewhere else in the system. It can't come from the deposits.
But it doesn't have to affect that bank or you. It could be.
Well, it could affect any bank.
But
Yeah.
a bigger system.
It's a bigger system.
Like you said, somebody can get out, but not everybody can get out.
Oh, yeah. And I had this personal conversation in the Board of Governors in Washington, D.C., in the actual room where they actually have the Board of Governors meet. I got to go to an actual meeting there. Actually, we went there to see if we could go through it, and the guy wouldn't let us through. And I had a young friend with me, and he said, well, do they ever have tours through here? He said, yeah, actually, we have a group of young Japanese business students coming within, 40 minutes or something. And so I say, we'll come back. So we come back, and we were just a little late, but he said, well, they just went upstairs, so you can go up, and we was just a little bit late. So we sat down there, and we listened, and they gave them a spiel, and then we got up to sit around the actual table where they have their board meeting. After the meeting was over, I actually got to sit my little behind her in the same chair that Dreamsand sits in when he chairs the meetings. Didn't have a camera, unfortunately, so I didn't get a chance to take a picture of it. But at the end of that meeting, Robert Ewald, the flow of funds, said, yes, you're right. As an individual, we can get out of debt, but collectively, we cannot. And if we can't collectively get out of debt, then the debt has to grow.